My name is Omar, and I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. It was a Friday morning when everything changed. I was preparing for Juma prayers at our mosque, the same place I'd served as imam for 15 years, the same place where I'd married couples, buried the dead, and guided lost souls back to Allah. That's when Khalil walked in with a briefcase. "Brother Omar," he said, his smile wide and familiar, "Allah has blessed us with an anonymous donation." I opened the case. Inside were stacks of crisp $100 bills, $500,000. "Subhanallah," I whispered, "this will help so many families." Khalil nodded, his eyes gleaming in a way I didn't understand then. "The donor wants to remain anonymous," he said, to deposit it immediately. I trusted Khalil completely. He was my treasurer, my best friend for 15 years, my brother in faith. We'd grown up together, memorized Quran together, built this community together. I should have asked more questions. I should have been suspicious of such a massive donation from nowhere. But when you trust someone with your life, you don't think they're planning to destroy it. I took the money to the bank myself that afternoon. The deposit slip felt heavy in my hands, but I thought it was the weight of blessing, not the weight of my coming destruction. The police came during Fajr prayer. I was leading the congregation in the pre-dawn darkness when the doors exploded open. Flashlights cut through the peace sanctuary like knives. Heavy boots stomped across the prayer carpet where barefoot worshippers had just been prostrating to Allah. "Omar Abdullah, you're under arrest for money laundering." The handcuffs clicked around my wrists as my congregation watched in horror. Mrs. Amina, who brought me homemade cookies every Friday, gasped and covered her mouth. Young Ahmed, who I'd been teaching Arabic, stared at me with wide, confused eyes. "There's been a mistake," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't understand." "The $500,000 in drug money you deposited yesterday says otherwise," the officer replied. Drug money. The words hit me like a physical blow. The anonymous donation, the money I'd trusted, the blessing I thought Allah had sent, it was blood money from criminals. As they pushed me toward the police car, I saw Khalil in the crowd. Our eyes met for one terrible moment. Instead of the shock and confusion I expected to see in my best friend's face, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Relief. That's when I knew. Somehow, someway, Khalil was involved in this nightmare. My brother in faith had become my destroyer. The jail cell smelled like despair and disinfectant. I sat on the thin mattress, staring at my hands, the same hands that had held the Quran, that had made dua for my community, that had unknowingly touched drug money. My lawyer, a tired-looking man named Mr. Hassan, sat across from me with files scattered between us. "Omar, the evidence is overwhelming," he said. "Bank records show you've been receiving large deposits for months." "That's impossible. I only deposited money once, and Khalil brought it to me." Mr. Hassan's expression grew grave. "Khalil testified against you yesterday." The words hit harder than the handcuffs, harder than the arrest, harder than everything. "What did you say?" "Your mosque treasurer, Khalil Rahman, testified that you've been washing drug money through the mosque accounts for over a year. He says you confessed to him about your involvement with a cartel." I couldn't breathe. The man I'd trusted with my life, my reputation, my mosque, he wasn't just involved in framing me. He was the architect of my destruction. "He's lying," I whispered. "He had documentation, Omar, financial records, text messages, even recordings of conversations." My head spun. Khalil had planned this for months, maybe years. Every friendly conversation, every shared meal, every moment of brotherhood, it was all a lie. The courtroom felt like a tomb. I sat in my orange jumpsuit, watching my life get dismantled piece by piece. Then my brother Rashid took the witness stand. Rashid, who'd taught me to pray when I was 7. Rashid, who'd supported my decision to become an imam. Rashid, who I'd called my closest friend after Khalil. "Please state your relationship to the defendant," the prosecutor said. "Omar is my younger brother. And has he ever discussed his involvement in money laundering with you?" My heart stopped. Rashid looked directly at me, his face unreadable. "Yes," he said quietly. 3 months ago, Omar told me he was working with people who could provide large donations to the mosque. He said the money came from questionable sources, but it was for a good cause. The courtroom gasped. I felt like I was drowning. "No," I shouted, standing up. "Rashid, what are you doing? You know that's not true." But my brother wouldn't meet my eyes. He continued his testimony, describing conversations that never happened, confessions I never made, a criminal I never was. As they led me back to my cell, one thought echoed in my mind. If I couldn't trust my best friend or my own brother, who could I trust? Only Allah remained. But in that moment, I wondered if even He had abandoned me. My cellmate was an old man named Yusuf who kept to himself. He was thin and gray, with gentle eyes that seemed to hold deep sadness. The guard said he was in for petty theft. For 3 days, we barely spoke. I spent my time in shock, trying to understand how my life had become this nightmare. Yusuf prayed quietly in the corner, but I couldn't bring myself to join him. How could I face Allah when everyone believed I was a criminal? On the 4th night, I woke to the sound of beautiful recitation. Yusuf was sitting in the moonlight, reciting Quran in the most perfect Arabic I'd ever heard. His voice was rich and melodic, filled with the kind of understanding that only comes from years of study. "You're not just some petty thief," I said when he finished. He turned to me, his eyes reflecting the dim light. "And you're not a money launderer." "How do you know?" "I can see it in your eyes, brother. I've seen real criminals. I've seen men who choose evil. You're not one of them. Then why am I here?" Yusuf was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes Allah tests us in ways we don't understand. Sometimes our greatest trials become our greatest blessings. This feels like punishment, not blessing. "I thought the same thing once," he said softly. "I was wrong." There was something in his voice that made me believe he knew exactly what I was going through, but I couldn't imagine how a simple old man could understand my complex nightmare. "I need to tell you something," Yusuf said on our 5th night together, "but you must promise to keep it secret." I nodded, desperate for any truth in my world of lies. 20 years ago, I was an imam like you. I had a beautiful mosque, a loving family, respect in my community. His voice cracked, and I threw it all away. "What happened?" "I stole money. Not drug money, just regular donations meant for the poor. I was gambling, and I got in deep with dangerous people. I took what wasn't mine to take." I stared at him in shock. This gentleman, this person who recited Quran like an angel, was an actual criminal? I served 5 years in prison, lost my wife, my children, my reputation. When I got out, I swore I'd spend the rest of my life making amends. "But why are you here now?" Yusuf's eyes grew intense. "Because I'm working undercover for the FBI. The petty theft charge is fake. It's my cover story." My head spun. "Undercover for what?" "To catch the same drug cartel that framed you. The same cartel that your friend Khalil works for." The words hit me like lightning. "You know about Khalil?" "I know everything, Omar, and I have proof that you're innocent." For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. But then I saw the sadness in Yusuf's eyes, and I knew there was more to this story. "I have security footage of Khalil planting the money in your mosque office," Yusuf said. "I have recordings of him planning your setup. I have evidence that would free you tomorrow." My heart raced. "Then why haven't you used it?" "Because using it would blow my cover and destroy a 2-year investigation into a cartel that's killed dozens of people, including..." His voice broke. "Including my son." The pain in his voice was overwhelming. "Your son?" "Khalil's cartel sold him the drugs that killed him. My boy was only 19. Tears rolled down Yusuf's weathered cheeks. "This investigation is my chance for justice, but saving you would ruin everything." I understood now. Yusuf could free me, but it would mean letting his son's killers escape. The weight of that choice was unbearable. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to stay silent about what I've told you. I'm asking you to serve time for a crime you didn't commit so that justice can be served for crimes you can't imagine." The choice before me was impossible. My freedom versus justice for murder victims. My reputation versus stopping a cartel that destroyed families. But as I looked at this broken man who'd lost everything to find justice for his son, I knew what I had to do. "I'll stay silent," I whispered. For the first time since I'd known him, Yusuf smiled. That night, I made a choice that changed everything. Instead of demanding my freedom, instead of screaming about injustice, I decided to help Yusuf catch the real criminals. Even if it meant staying in jail, even if it meant everyone thinking I was guilty. It was the first selfless choice I'd made since this nightmare began. And somehow, making that choice filled me with more peace than I'd felt in weeks. I began to pray again. Not prayers begging for freedom or vindication, but prayers asking Allah to give me strength to do what was right. Prayers asking for patience to endure what I had to endure. Prayers asking for wisdom to see His plan in my suffering. Yusuf taught me things about the cartel, how they operated, who they targeted, how they used people like Khalil to launder money through religious institutions. The more I learned, the more I understood how deep this evil ran. They've been using mosques across the state, Yusuf explained. Your mosque was just one of many, but you were the only imam who was completely innocent, so they had to frame you to make their story work. Why me? Because your reputation was spotless. If they could make people believe that someone like you was corrupt, they could make people believe anything. My innocence had made me the perfect victim. The irony was bitter, but somehow it also felt like part of Allah's plan. 3 months into my sentence, I received a visitor I never expected. Fatima, my wife, sat across from me in the visiting room. She looked tired, older, like grief had aged her years in just a few months. I found something, she said quietly, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were financial documents I'd never seen before. Records showing how Khalil had been moving money through fake accounts, using my forged signature, creating a paper trail that led straight to me. I found these hidden in your Quran, she said, tears in her eyes. The one you kept on your desk at home. Khalil must have planted them there, but... She paused. But they actually prove you're innocent. They show he was setting you up. My hands shook as I looked at the evidence. Finally, proof of what I already knew. But I couldn't use it without destroying Yusuf's investigation. Why didn't you bring these to the police? I asked. I wanted to talk to you first. Omar, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have stood by you. Looking at my wife, seeing her pain and regret, I made another impossible choice. Keep these documents safe, I said, but don't take them to the police yet. What? Why? I can't explain right now, but please, trust me. Just this once, trust me. The confusion and hurt in her eyes nearly broke my resolve, but I held firm. Sometimes love means protecting someone from the truth, even when that protection looks like abandonment. My brother Rashid was dying. Cancer, the doctors said. 6 months to live, maybe less. When Fatima told me during her next visit, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Grief, anger, and something that might have been relief. He wants to see you, she said. I don't want to see him. Omar, he's your brother. He's the reason I'm in here. His testimony convicted me. But even as I said the words, I knew I would see him. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, Rashid was still my blood. They brought him to the prison hospital in a wheelchair. He looked skeletal, his skin gray and thin. When he saw me, he began to cry. Omar, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Why did you do it, Rashid? Why did you lie? They threatened my family. Khalil said if I didn't testify against you, they'd kill Layla and the children. He grabbed my hands with surprising strength. I was a coward. I chose my family over my brother, and I've regretted it every day since. The anger I'd carried for months began to dissolve. Rashid wasn't evil. He was just afraid, just human. I forgive you, I said, and meant it. There's something else, he whispered. I recorded my real testimony, the truth. It's in my safety deposit box. Layla has the key. Another piece of evidence I couldn't use, another truth I had to keep hidden. But forgiving Rashid felt like a weight lifting from my soul. The attack came without warning. I was in the prison yard when 3 men cornered me near the fence. They were massive, covered in tattoos, with eyes like dead fish. You know too much about our business, Imam, the leader growled. I realized with horror that these were cartel members, sent to kill me before I could expose their operation. Somehow they'd discovered I knew about their plans. The first punch caught me in the stomach, doubling me over. The second was aimed at my head, but it never landed. Yusuf appeared like lightning, moving with the speed and skill of a much younger man. He fought all 3 attackers with techniques I'd never seen, protecting me with his own body. But there were too many of them. A knife flashed in the sunlight, and suddenly Yusuf was on the ground, blood spreading across his shirt. You killed the wrong imam, he gasped as guards finally arrived. The attackers were subdued, but Yusuf was badly hurt. As they carried him to the medical wing, he grabbed my arm. The operation is tonight, he whispered. If I don't make it, find Agent Martinez. Tell him to remember my son. I held his hand as they wheeled him away, realizing that this gentle old man had just risked his life to save mine. The cartel had tried to kill me, but they'd only made me more determined to see justice done. Yusuf survived, but barely. The knife had missed his heart by inches. As he recovered, he told me the full truth about the FBI operation. It was massive, a 2-year investigation into a drug network that spanned 5 states. They were planning simultaneous raids on dozens of locations, including the mosque where Khalil still worked as treasurer. "After tonight, it'll all be over," Yusuf said from his hospital bed. "The evidence will come out, your innocence will be proven, and justice will finally be served." "What about you?" "My part is done. I got them the information they needed. Your friend Khalil led them straight to the top of the organization." That evening, I watched the news in the prison common room. Breaking news flashed across the screen. FBI raids drug cartel, dozens arrested. I saw Khalil being led away in handcuffs, his face shocked and panicked. I saw the mosque I'd loved being searched by federal agents. I saw my replacement imam, a good man named Brother Mahmoud, answering reporters' questions about how the community had been deceived. "The FBI has confirmed that former Imam Omar Abdullah was framed by the organization," the reporter said. "He is expected to be released and cleared of all charges within the week." Around me, other prisoners whooped and cheered. But I felt only quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served. Allah's plan was becoming clear. My suffering had helped stop evil that was far greater than my personal pain. My release came on a Thursday morning. I walked out of prison with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart full of complex emotions. Fatima was waiting for me, along with my children and Brother Mahmoud from the mosque. But the reunion wasn't what I dreamed of during those long months in prison. The community was divided about me. Some welcomed me back as a victim of injustice. Others whispered that where there's smoke, there's fire, that maybe I really had been involved somehow. My children were polite, but distant. Months of believing their father was a criminal had created wounds that wouldn't heal quickly. And Fatima, though she stood by me now, carried her own guilt about doubting me. Our conversations were careful, formal, like we were strangers trying to remember how to be married. "It will take time," Brother Mahmoud told me. "The community needs to heal. Your family needs to heal. You need to heal." But I wasn't sure healing was possible. The prison cell was gone, but I still felt trapped. Trapped by whispers, trapped by damaged relationships, trapped by a reputation that might never fully recover. I had my freedom, but I'd lost so much more than that. Some nights, I wondered if staying in prison might have been easier than facing this broken world outside. The job rejections came one after another. "We've decided to go with another candidate. Your background doesn't quite fit our needs. We'll keep your resume on file." No one wanted to hire a former imam who'd been accused of money laundering, even one who'd been proven innocent. The news stories about my vindication were buried on page 6, while my arrest had been front-page news. I took whatever work I could find, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves at a halal grocery store, delivering food for restaurants. Honest work, but humbling for someone who'd once led a congregation of 500 families. The hardest part wasn't the physical labor or the low pay. It was the looks people gave me, the mixture of pity, suspicion, and curiosity. I was famous now, but for all the wrong reasons. One evening, as I mopped floors in an empty office building, I broke down completely. The injustice of it all overwhelmed me. I'd sacrificed my freedom to help catch criminals. I'd been proven innocent. I'd lost everything for truth and justice. And this was my reward? I fell to my knees on that cold linoleum floor and cried like I hadn't cried since childhood. Deep, painful sobs that came from a place of pure exhaustion. "Allah," I whispered, "I don't understand your plan anymore. I've tried to do right, and everything keeps going wrong. What do you want from me?" The empty building echoed with my voice, but no answer came. The envelope appeared on my doorstep with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000 and a simple note. "For Hajj, you have earned this pilgrimage through your sacrifice. A grateful father." I stared at the check in disbelief. $50,000 was more money than I'd seen since before my arrest. It was enough for Hajj, with plenty left over to help my struggling family. But who would send this, and why? Fatima found me sitting at the kitchen table, holding the check and crying. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Someone wants to send me to Mecca." She sat beside me, reading the note over and over. "Who would do this?" "I don't know, but—" I paused, remembering Yusuf's words about Allah's mysterious plans. Maybe I don't need to know. For months I'd been asking Allah what He wanted from me. Maybe this was His answer. The next day I went to a travel agency that specialized in Hajj packages. The agent, a kind woman named Sister Khadija, helped me choose dates and accommodations. "You seem nervous," she observed. "I never thought I'd be able to afford Hajj. I never thought I deserved it." "Brother," she said gently, "Allah calls whom He wills. If the money came, it's because you're meant to go." As I signed the paperwork, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Hope. Maybe my story wasn't over. Maybe Allah had more planned for me than I could imagine. The flight to Saudi Arabia was the longest 12 hours of my life. As we flew over continents and oceans, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I was a respected imam with a comfortable life. Now I was an ex-convict, traveling to Mecca with money from a stranger, seeking something I couldn't even name. The plane was full of pilgrims, men and women from every corner of the earth, all heading to the same sacred destination. I listened to conversations in Arabic, Urdu, Turkish, French, and languages I couldn't identify. Sitting next to me was an elderly man from Bangladesh who'd saved for 20 years to make this trip. Across the aisle was a young woman from London, making Hajj in memory of her deceased mother. Everyone had a story. Everyone had sacrificed something to be here. "First Hajj?" the Bangladeshi man asked me in broken English. "Yes," I replied. "Mine too. I am 73 years old, finally making my dream come true." I realized then that age, nationality, and wealth didn't matter on this plane. We were all just servants of Allah, responding to His call. As the pilot announced our descent into Jeddah, the entire plane began reciting the talbiyah. "Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Here I am, O Allah." My voice joined the chorus, and for the first time in months, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. The moment I saw the Kaaba, I collapsed. Not from exhaustion or heat, but from pure, overwhelming emotion. After everything I'd been through, the arrests, the betrayal, the imprisonment, the struggles, I was here, in the holiest place on earth. The great mosque was massive beyond imagination, filled with millions of pilgrims dressed in white ihram garments. From above, we must have looked like white blood cells flowing around the heart of Islam. But it wasn't the size that overwhelmed me. It was the feeling of complete insignificance and complete belonging at the same time. I was nothing in this crowd, just one speck among millions. But I was also exactly where Allah wanted me to be. I joined the flow of pilgrims circling the Kaaba for tawaf, 7 times around like planets orbiting the sun. With each circuit, I felt layers of pain and anger and confusion being stripped away. On the 3rd circuit, a thought struck me so powerfully I almost stumbled. Everything that had happened to me, the betrayal, the imprisonment, even the suffering, had led me here. If Khalil hadn't framed me, I never would have met Yusuf. If I hadn't met Yusuf, the cartel might never have been caught. If the cartel hadn't been caught, I never would have received that mysterious check. Allah's plan was becoming clear. My suffering had served a purpose I couldn't see at the time. As I completed my 7th circuit, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see a familiar face smiling at me through tears. It was Yusuf. "What are you doing here?" I asked, embracing my former cellmate. "Same as you," Yusuf said, his voice thick with emotion, "following Allah's call." We found a quiet corner in the mosque to talk. Yusuf looked different, healthier, more peaceful, like a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "The cartel case is closed," he told me. "Khalil and 15 others got life sentences. The evidence you helped us gather led to arrests in 6 states. So your son got justice? More than that. The operation we stopped was planning to expand into schools, targeting children as young as 12. We saved hundreds of kids from the fate that took my boy." We sat in comfortable silence, watching pilgrims from around the world pray and circle the Kaaba. "Omar," Yusuf said finally, "I need to tell you something. I sent you that check." I stared at him in shock. "You? But how? Why?" "The FBI paid me well for my work, and I had nothing else to spend it on. My family is gone. My old life is over. But you sacrificed everything to help me get justice. This pilgrimage is the least I could do. But the note said, a grateful father. I am a grateful father. You helped me honor my son's memory and prevent other fathers from losing their children. Tears streamed down both our faces as the magnitude of Allah's plan became clear. Two broken men, thrown together in a prison cell, had become instruments of divine justice and mercy. The day of Arafat was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. 2 million pilgrims gathered on the plain where Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave his final sermon. The crowd stretched to the horizon in every direction, a sea of humanity united in worship. I stood on that sacred ground with Yusuf beside me, both of us overwhelmed by the spiritual energy surrounding us. From dawn to sunset, we prayed, we wept, we begged Allah for forgiveness and guidance. This is it, Yusuf whispered during the afternoon prayers. This is where all our sins are forgiven. This is where we start over. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the plain, I felt something shift inside me. All the anger I'd carried toward Khalil, toward Rashid, toward everyone who had wronged me, it simply evaporated. I understood now that they had all been playing their parts in Allah's greater plan. Even their betrayals had served a divine purpose. During the final prayers of the day, I made a dua that came from the deepest part of my soul. Allah, I don't understand your wisdom, but I trust it completely. Thank you for every trial, every pain, every moment of suffering. Thank you for using my brokenness to serve your justice. Thank you for bringing me here to this moment, to this understanding. As darkness fell over Arafat, I felt like a new person. The old Omar, the one who had been bitter, confused, and angry, was gone. In his place was someone who understood that Allah's mercy could turn any trial into a blessing. The crowd around the Kaaba was massive, pushing and surging like a living ocean. I was swept along with thousands of other pilgrims, trying to complete my final tawaf before leaving Mecca. The heat was overwhelming, the crush of bodies almost unbearable. Several times I thought I might fall and be trampled, but I kept moving, kept circling, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. On my 6th circuit, the crowd suddenly surged, and I was pushed directly against the Kaaba itself. My hand touched the black silk covering. In that instant, everything changed. I can't describe what I felt. It was beyond words, beyond normal human experience. It was like touching the center of all creation, like connecting directly with Allah's mercy and love. Every cell in my body vibrated with divine energy. Every doubt I'd ever had about Allah's plan dissolved completely. Every question about why I'd suffered found its answer in that single moment of contact. I understood with absolute certainty that everything, absolutely everything, had been worth this moment. The crowd pushed me away from the Kaaba, but the feeling remained. I was transformed, baptized by divine touch, reborn in the shadow of Allah's house. As I completed my 7th circuit, I was sobbing with gratitude. Allah had called me from prison to paradise, from betrayal to blessing, from suffering to the most sacred place on earth. My hand had touched the heart of Islam, and my heart had touched the infinite mercy of Allah. In Medina, at the Prophet's mosque, I experienced the final piece of my spiritual puzzle. I was praying in the Rawda, the sacred garden between the Prophet's pulpit and his tomb, when I felt a presence unlike anything I'd experienced before. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming like touching the Kaaba. It was gentle, warm, like being welcomed home by a beloved friend. I understood, without words or visions, that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was pleased with my journey, that my suffering had been part of a path that led to this moment of acceptance and peace. In that sacred space, surrounded by millions of pilgrims from every corner of the earth, I felt the Prophet's intercession wrapping around me like a blanket. All the times I'd wondered if Allah had abandoned me, all the moments I'd questioned whether I was still worthy of His love, they were answered in that gentle, overwhelming sense of divine approval. I stayed in the Rawda for hours, praying and crying and experiencing a peace I'd never known existed. When I finally left, I was no longer the broken imam who had entered prison 2 years ago. I was no longer even the confused ex-convict who had boarded the plane to Saudi Arabia. I was a new creation, forged in the fire of trial and tempered in the mercy of Allah. My pilgrimage was complete, but I knew my real journey was just beginning. The flight home was bittersweet. I was leaving the holiest places on earth, but I was carrying their blessings with me. More importantly, I was returning with a clear understanding of my purpose. Allah hadn't put me through trials to punish me. He'd prepared me for something greater. As the plane lifted off from Jeddah, I made a promise to myself and to Allah. I would use my experience to help others who were suffering, who felt abandoned, who couldn't see Allah's plan in their pain. The passenger next to me was a young man named Ali, returning from his first Hajj. He looked troubled, so I asked him what was wrong. "I made so many mistakes before this trip," he said. "I don't know if Allah can really forgive me. I don't know if I deserve what I experienced there." His words could have been my own 2 years ago. "Brother," I said gently, "let me tell you a story about Allah's mercy." For the next several hours, I shared my journey with Ali, the betrayal, the imprisonment, the investigation, and finally the miraculous path to Mecca. By the time we landed, Ali was crying with relief and hope. "If Allah could turn your suffering into such blessing," he said, "then maybe there's hope for me too." That conversation showed me what Allah wanted me to do with the rest of my life, be living proof that no trial is beyond His mercy, no person beyond His forgiveness. My family was waiting at the airport, but the reunion was more complex than I'd hoped. Fatima hugged me tightly, and I could feel years of pain and mistrust beginning to heal in that embrace. My children were more reserved, but there was something different in their eyes. Curiosity instead of shame, hope instead of disappointment. "You look different, Dad," my son Ahmed said. "I feel different," I replied. Over the following weeks, I slowly rebuilt relationships that had been damaged by my trials. It wasn't easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to restore. But the peace I'd found in Mecca gave me patience for the process. The community's reception was mixed. Some welcomed me back as a hero who'd helped expose corruption. Others remained suspicious, whispering that innocent people don't usually end up in such complicated situations. But I was no longer desperate for their approval. I'd received approval from a much higher authority. Brother Mahmoud, who had been serving as interim imam, approached me about returning to lead the mosque. "I'm honored," I told him, "but I think Allah has different plans for me." Instead, I began visiting other mosques, sharing my story with anyone who would listen. I spoke at Islamic centers, community gatherings, and even interfaith events. My message was always the same: Allah's mercy is greater than any trial, any sin, any suffering we can imagine. Slowly, people began seeking me out. Muslims who were struggling with addiction, who had made terrible mistakes, who felt abandoned by Allah and their communities. 6 months after returning from Hajj, I received a call from Yusuf. "Omar, I have an idea," he said. "What if we started a foundation together?" "What kind of foundation?" "For people like us, ex-convicts, people who've been betrayed, families destroyed by drugs and crime, people who need to know that Allah's mercy can redeem anyone." The idea was perfect. Together, we had experienced both sides of the justice system, the corruption that destroys lives and the redemption that rebuilds them. We called it the Mercy Foundation. Yusuf handled the legal and financial aspects, drawing on his FBI connections and settlement money. I focused on the spiritual counseling and community outreach. Our first client was a young man named Hassan, whose father had been arrested for drug dealing. Hassan was angry, ashamed, and ready to follow his father's path. "Everyone already thinks I'm a criminal," he told me during our first meeting. "Why not become one?" I shared my story with him, how I'd been falsely accused, how I'd lost everything, how I'd found purpose in the midst of suffering. "But you were innocent," Hassan said. "My father actually is guilty." "That doesn't matter," I replied. "Allah's mercy covers all sins for those who truly repent. Your father's choices don't define your destiny." Over 6 months, I watched Hassan transform from an angry teenager into a young man with purpose. He started volunteering at the mosque, helping other youth avoid the mistakes his family had made. "You saved my life," he told me one day. "No," I said. "Allah saved both our lives. I'm just the messenger." By the end of our first year, the Mercy Foundation had helped over 50 families. Ex-convicts finding legitimate work, children of criminals discovering their own worth, communities learning to embrace redemption instead of condemnation. Each success felt like another piece of Allah's plan falling into place. 5 years have passed since that Friday morning when Khalil walked into my mosque with a briefcase full of blood money. 5 years since my life was destroyed by betrayal. 5 years since I learned that Allah's plans are bigger and more beautiful than anything we can imagine. Today, I'm sitting in my office at the Mercy Foundation, preparing for our annual fundraising dinner. The walls are covered with photos. Hassan graduating from college, former addicts celebrating years of sobriety, families reunited after years of separation. Yusuf walks in carrying a letter. "This came for you," he says, smiling. The return address makes my heart skip. It's from Khalil, writing from federal prison. With trembling hands, I open the envelope. "Brother Omar, I know I have no right to call you that anymore. I know I destroyed your life for money and greed. But I've been following news of your foundation, and I want you to know something. Seeing what you've become, seeing how Allah used my evil for good, has convinced me that there might be mercy even for someone like me. I've started praying again. I've started believing that Allah might forgive even the worst betrayal. Thank you for showing me that redemption is possible. Your brother in Islam, if you'll still have me, Khalil." I set the letter down and look out my window at the mosque across the street. Not my old mosque, but a new one where I sometimes give lectures about Allah's mercy. Fatima enters my office, now my partner in running the foundation. Our marriage, tested by fire, has become stronger than I ever thought possible. "Ready for tonight's dinner?" she asks. "Ready," I say, picking up my speech notes. "Tonight, I'll stand before 500 people and tell them the same story I've been telling for 5 years. How Allah took a false accusation and turned it into a path to Mecca. How He took betrayal and transformed it into a mission of mercy. How He took the worst day of my life and made it the beginning of His greatest blessing. I'll tell them about touching the Kaaba, about finding purpose in prison, about discovering that Allah's mercy truly is greater than any sin. And somewhere in that audience will be someone who needs to hear that message. Someone who thinks they're beyond forgiveness, beyond redemption, beyond hope. They'll learn what I learned in that prison cell, on that plain in Arafat, in that moment when my hand touched the house of Allah. No matter how deep you've fallen, no matter who has betrayed you, no matter what mistakes you've made, Allah's light can illuminate any tunnel, His mercy can heal any wound, His love can transform any life, even mine, even yours, even the person who seems most lost. This is the story Allah wrote with my pain. This is the masterpiece He painted with my tears, and I wouldn't change a single brushstroke. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.